Hi, listeners. Welcome to the Grief Out Loud podcast produced by the Dougy Center for Grieving Children. I'm Jana DeCristofaro and wanted to give you just a little heads up as you listen to this episode. You'll be hearing references to our old name, which was Dear Dougy. So just so you don't get too confused, you're listening to the right podcast, and we look forward to bringing you even more great content under the Grief Out Loud name. Thanks for joining us. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dear Dougy podcast produced by the Dougy Center for Grieving Children in Portland, Oregon. I'm Jana DeCristofaro. After over 30 years of listening to the stories of grieving children, teens, young adults, and adults in our grief support groups, we wanted to find a way to share with you what we've learned from them. Our podcast is a way to open up the often avoided conversation about grief. While we will all experience loss during our lives, when it occurs, most of us don't know how to feel, how to talk about it, or what to do. So whether you're grieving a loss or wanting to support someone who is, we're here to explore and talk about what matters to you most in grief. Today I'm joined by Rebecca Hobbs-Lawrence. This is Rebecca's third time being on the podcast. And I asked Rebecca to join us because she is very well versed in talking about kids and teens and particularly craft activities and different creative ways for families who are dealing with grief. In today's episode, we're going to focus on the holidays, which I don't know about you, Rebecca, but how did they get here so fast?
I don't know. Last week, I was feeling overwhelmed by the fact that all of a sudden I wasn't ready.
Well, I made the mistake yesterday afternoon of driving to Target, and I thought, why are all these people here at 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon?
I know.
And then it hit me.
They're all out already.
So, families who come to our grief support groups, they're reflecting what's happening in the larger community. So what are some of the things that you're hearing from families about the holidays this year?
Today, I think they're happening right now for people. And Thanksgiving is kind of right around the corner next week now. And it seems like last week I heard so many parents thinking all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I am not ready. It's here.
We just got through Halloween. I just finished making costumes.
Right. And school just started even. Like, how did this happen? And I think there's such an immense amount of pressure, too, around the holidays of wanting family rituals and being challenged by family rituals at the same time, of not wanting to do them again. It's sad. And so I think for a lot of families, there's just a really overwhelming feeling of the expectations other people have and that they have themselves, too, for the holidays.
A lot of questions around traditions. What to keep, what to do differently.
Absolutely. And making sure that it's fun for the kids. And I think that is a huge expectation that we put on ourselves, too. Mm-hmm. There's a lot going on.
So because we've been hearing that from families for so long, over the years we've designed a holiday plan worksheet along with a tip sheet for just some ideas of how to approach the holidays and ways to take care of yourselves and ways to be there for your kids. So I'll link to that in the show notes, and that's kind of what we'll be referring to today. But Rebecca, I wanted to start with a little bit of a personal story. Can you tell us a little bit about how the holidays maybe are going to be different for you all this year?
They are going to be a bit different. This year, my father-in-law just died early September. He had battled leukemia and hepatitis for many, many years. And so we were hoping he would make it through this holiday season, that we would have one last holiday season with him. That was not to be so. And so for us, it's really rethinking about our families and who goes where and how do we remember him when he's not physically here with us, because he certainly has a huge presence in our lives.
Even when he's not physically here.
Even when he is not physically here. I saw a whole bunch of birds out at our bird feeders yesterday morning and thought, oh, I'm wondering if he's sending us the bird. He is an avid bird watcher. And frogs. He had frogs everywhere. He loved frogs. And one of the things we'd often get him for Christmas presents was some kind of really cute frog statue and Buddha frog and
did he have a lot of pet frogs
frog.
Too? Or
No pet frogs, but they're all around his house. And so we were at the backyard bird shop getting bird seed for all the birds that we have to feed now, since he is not here to feed them. We are taking part in that, and found a frog ornament that's going to go on our tree this year. And it's just for us a way to keep him close. and to remember him. And when we will put it up, we will share stories of him. I have fish ornaments on my tree for my father, cookie ornaments on my tree for my grandmother.
This is a long-standing
It's a long-standing tradition.
How do you talk to your kids about that?
They are so enculturated into this now. When we go out, we're together, and it just came up of like, oh, this frog ornament reminds me of your grandfather. And while we're in the store, one of them will start sharing a story about him, and they did this with my father and my grandmother too. And so it's just something like, oh, what about taking this one home? Does this feel like the right one to go home and be on the tree? A lot of our ornaments have stories. Some of them are sad because that person is no longer with us. But there's also ornaments of accomplishments and our own creations too. So I really like to think of our tree as a connection tree in a lot of different ways. So for them, because those connections are just a huge part of our life anyway, that it's not unusual for them to have a Christmas tree ornament for those people who are no longer with us.
Because they were born into this tradition.
They were born into this tradition. They were. But I think it's a nice tradition that anybody can start. It can be something on an ornament. Actually, a really close friend had stockings, and it wasn't for anybody in particular, but she would cut out little felt symbols for different people that were no longer with them, close friends or other family members, and just tack on that little symbol onto their stocking. And it was that special stocking, and they would put notes in it, and sometimes people would come and actually put money and things into it, and they would be donations to charities then. And so that was a way that they themselves and their family remembered the person who died.
Well, that's a new twist on that, because I've definitely heard of families who will hang a stocking or whatever the family's tradition might be. Not everyone does stockings and trees and presents, but whatever their tradition is, they include something for the person in their life who have died. So if we go with the stocking one of hanging the stocking and then actually putting in small gifts that they wish they could have given to the person who died, and then finding someone else to pass those on to, or everyone in the family writing down memories or favorite stories of that person and putting it in the stocking and then reading them on Christmas.
Absolutely. I think there's lots of ways we can keep them close to us during the holiday season.
So one thing that comes to mind is we have a bunch of ideas, and families have a bunch of ideas. What do you suggest for families, particularly like their first year going into the holidays? Because not everybody wants to do the same thing.
Right.
So, what do you suggest for families of how to navigate that piece of it?
I think it's important before the real stress of the holidays starts, that families can really sit down together and have it be fun, and not have it be a serious talk, but to say, hey, let's get some Chinese food or pizza and sit down together, and we're going to talk about the holidays. And you spoke about our holiday tip sheet and worksheet, and I think that's a great place to start so that families can say, what's important to me? What's important to you? After my dad died, my mom wanted nothing to do with Christmas lights on the outside of our house, like nothing. But for my brother and I, especially me,
To be honest,
it was really, really important. I wanted the outside of our house to still look joyful because the inside was really sad. And so we had a really great neighbor across the street who was willing to put lights on the front of our house for us because my mom just couldn't. Like, she didn't want to get in the box. So I think it's really important for families to sit together and say, well, that's really important to you, and I want to honor that, but that's really hard for me, and I don't know if I can do that. And then to find friends and family members who might be able to step in and support that way because they want to. A lot of people, we hear that all the time.
How can I help?
What can I do? Help? Right. And so that's a great way the holiday season to show somebody you really care and you're really with them at this difficult time for them. And
so you've got this piece of identifying what people's accepting what are limitations or boundaries, such a hard thing in grief.
Clear boundaries.
And then reaching out to our support system and getting creative about how to meet everybody's needs and honor everybody's boundaries. And I was thinking too, each family has their own set of traditions and things that they do or don't do, but there can be ones that are very specific to certain people that may not be on everybody's radar. So helpful to sit down as a family, because it may be, for some families there's the holidays, but there's also traditions for what they do after the holidays.
Yes.
And that can fall off people's minds as well. So I'm saying for a lot of families, especially here in Oregon, because it's rainy and gray for the next 9 months.
Right. We won't see it again until July.
Right. So we see a lot of plans and vacations and trips for going to locations where the sun might actually be shining. And I've heard some families say, we're skipping the holidays this year. We're just not going to engage with it.
Right.
Maybe next year we'll go back to it. But we're totally going to plan a trip for January to give us something to look forward to. It's not connected to the holidays.
And I think that can be really important too. And that things might shift a lot that first year, to take out your list again the following year. So maybe if this isn't your first year, it's your second or third year, and you've done things really different, I think it's still really important to come together as a family and talk about that. Like, what's working? What do we want to keep of our new traditions? And maybe there's some old traditions we want to bring back that we're a little further away from the loss, and it feels important again to incorporate them. So I think it's always helpful to have that open discussion.
And what's interesting about that is if you do a plan, whatever year you're in, but if you do one now and you list all the things that your family has done in the past, then there's a record of it.
Right.
Because I was just trying to think, my family's changed so much and moved so much over the years. I don't even remember a lot of our holiday traditions. And especially for children who are really young, when a parent or a sibling or grandparent or someone important in their family dies, they don't have a lot of those memories to draw from. So having that record that they could even go back to when they're a young adult or having a family of their own to say, oh, this is something my grandparents used to do. I would like to do that.
Absolutely. And that can be a really grounding experience for them, too, to bring something back from a long time ago. I think that's really important.
So write it down and then put it in the cloud just so you can find it
Right.
20 years from now.
Yep. And I actually have had some families who have taken pictures, have that incorporated into their photo album of their rituals now.
Oh, of their new ones that
Of their new ones, too. So they're actually, instead of just writing them down, they actually have pictures of them.
So they can go
doing
back and
these different things so that they actually can go back and look and be like, oh, yeah, that really was a good experience. Or, oh, no, wait, that one, let's not do that one again.
Right. Or what was the deal with Uncle Joe and the oranges?
Right.
I know there's something about Uncle Joe and oranges, but I don't remember what that is.
Right.
Or what have you heard from families who do kind of want to just skip the whole thing? What have you seen people do in terms of taking that route?
What I have seen is if a whole family agrees to it, generally that family chooses something, an event to do instead. I mean, most people don't choose just to stay at home and watch TV and play video games.
Although that's okay if you do that.
That could be. But what I have seen, though, is that families say, hey, let's in the morning go work at a soup kitchen. I've actually had a few families at the Dougie Center do that.
As a way to kind of give back to the community.
Give back. Like, we don't really feel like we want to do that this year, but we want to give back to other people who are needing some extra support also. And that can feel really good. I've had families go to the Christmas Day movie, so they make that their event. Like, what movie do we want to go see? And they may go have lunch and go to a movie. And that's awesome. Some have gone to the beach just for the day even. Let's go pack the car in the morning and just take off.
Get out, get some fresh air, get in a new environment.
Absolutely. Even if it's just walking along the beach, even if it's a stormy day.
Just so everyone knows, Oregon's on the coast, so it's not unusual for us to take a day trip to the beach. But for those of you listening, maybe in Nebraska, you might have to find a different outdoor location to go to.
Something different, something that's not in your everyday repertoire of, being able to look with different eyes on a different scene.
And I wonder, too, about families where there can be a huge amount of financial stress after somebody in their life dies, whether it was an adult or a child, if there's medical bills or other things that are lingering for people with financial stress. So coming up with things, it doesn't have to be something big, but maybe there's a discussion of, we usually do a lot of gifts. This year we're going to go one gift per person, or we're going to go, volunteer or do something else.
Scaling back. And maybe it's the gift that we're just going to get something that we want to do as a family together.
Or like a gift certificate for an experience or something like that.
Together. Or, what can we do as a family? Or being able to pick something, and especially if there's multiple kids, but maybe it's a gift that, everybody's a name draw kind of thing. So I think there's some really creative ways to do some things.
And one of the things I've heard from kids as it becomes one of their favorite presents is, say it was a parent who died or even a sibling who died, and their caregiver is pretty stressed for time too, not just money. And so the opportunity to have one-on-one time with their adult can be pretty limited. So,
yes.
Like handwritten gift certificates or something that say this is for an hour of video game time with mom, or this is, 2 hours of playing in the park with dad.
Something that you really love to do, and then if your parent can just spend that time with just you doing that, that is a phenomenal gift.
And maybe and we have to turn our phones off too, or something like that, where it's like the attention, not that everybody can turn their phone off, but to just really focus that attention. And that can be such a meaningful gift for kids.
And I think it goes both ways too. Kids can think creatively like that too. And sometimes you see that in school, but making that little certificate for your mom saying, I'll help unload the dishwasher, can be a huge gift to a parent.
Right. Which I was like, that was already my chore as a kid, but here's your present, Mom. I'll keep doing it.
But I'll do it without whining today.
Right. Or less whining, maybe. So, Rebecca, you're also the coordinator of one of our newer avenues of support at the Dougy Center for families when somebody has an advanced serious illness, our Pathways program. And I'm just curious, is there anything that you heard or know about that is a little bit different, or something to consider for families out there listening maybe who are in that situation?
For a lot of these families that we see right now in Pathways, this holiday season will be their last holiday season that they spend together. And they are acutely aware of that. And so for them, that we talked about expectations, both on ourselves and what we think others are expecting of us, can be really huge for families who are at end of life, because they want to make this a meaningful holiday season. And yet for our families that come that we see, they're exhausted. They're overwhelmed and they're exhausted from caretaking, from hospital trips and medical doctor appointments, and for kids who are both trying to be in school and do well and still attend to a parent who's dying and their caregivers. So for them, go easy on yourself. And we tell this to all of our families too, like, be gentle with yourself and lower those expectations. Really slow down. And one of the best gifts was from one of our teen boys, and his mother died before this holiday. But one of the things he was aware of, because he wasn't sure, was that he recorded her voice. What he really wanted was stories from her. And so he just plugged his phone in and recorded her sharing stories of memories of him, little, and his sister. And so those become those priceless gifts that a parent can leave. So sometimes it's not about making the biggest and grandest last holiday ever that they think it should be, but it's those long-lasting gifts that your children and your other loved ones will cherish for a lifetime.
Right. So if you're a parent or a caregiver, or maybe you're a friend of a family of someone who's going through that, of just opening up that idea of recording the person or videotaping them, or
making a scrapbook
together.
Right. So that's one of the things we do around the holidays, as well as other times, is helping those families create meaningful connections that will be with their family members for years and years to come.
Well, thanks so much for that. And, we talked about saying no, and how setting limits and setting boundaries, particularly around the holiday season, because for anybody wandering through this time of the year, there can be so many invitations and so many social things to navigate and obligations. Are there other things that come to mind for self-care around this time of the year?
I think just taking a few minutes for yourself. One of the things I often tell adults with their kids is give kids bookends, a routine for the morning and a routine for the night. And honestly, I think it's helpful for us as adults, create our own bookends, that every morning, even if it's 2 minutes of doing something that's just for us and right before we go to bed, can be really powerful. Kind of makes everything in between like, okay, I can do this because I know what's going to happen on these ends. If it feels good to go out and be with friends for a while, do that. Don't feel like all your attention has to go towards your family during the holiday season. I think there's another expectation that we have to make it so meaningful to our children and everybody else that we love and care about, that we forget that we need to be recharged. And whether it's a quiet space and time, or it's going out with a couple friends that can just attend to us as well. I think that's really important.
So there's a level there of self-knowledge of what is recharging for you as an individual.
Right. And it might be quiet, or it might be a much more social activity.
Right, because there's a lot of cliches around self-care, and there's the idea of like, if you just put enough bubble bath in the bathtub, then that's great for you. But some people hate baths, and they are more nourished by interaction with people, like you said, or maybe they're more nourished by going for a walk by themselves. So, checking in. And the other thing I've been thinking about too is, as adults, we practice this self-knowledge, we practice this self-care, And then how to be transparent about that with the kids in our lives so that they can learn from our modeling. Not just that I see mom go running every morning, but she makes the connection for me that she's going running because that helps her do her job, or that helps her be a more patient mom.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much, Rebecca. I feel like we could talk about this topic for a long time. So since we don't have time to go into all the details, again, I'll put in the show notes a link to our holiday plan worksheet, which will take families through step by step how to identify traditions that they want to keep, maybe new traditions they want to create, ways for self-care and obligations and events that they do want to say yes to or they don't want to say yes to. So you can look through all of that on the show notes. And if you are interested in learning more about the Dougy Center, you can learn a lot about us at our website, which is www.dou.org. You can also find us on Facebook and on Twitter. And if you'd like to listen to any of our past episodes, you can find them on the website. And you can also find us in iTunes, where you can give us a rating or give us a review. So, Rebecca, thank you again for being here on the podcast.
Thank you.
And to all of you listening, tune in next time for the next episode of the Dear Dougy podcast.
Thanks for listening.